And processing for the chains on this beautiful song called Tired by Kevin Bias. Right now we've got the full master bus on and everything is mixed. I'm going to do a quick playback for that.
Ever asked, so no one knows. How do I feel?
With the full orchestration over in here.
I'm tired of the sickness that haunts me.
Okay, so what do I got going on here? Let's check it out. We're going to turn off the master bus and we're going to take a look at this vocal track. As it's mixed right here, this is what we got.
No one's ever asked, so no one knows.
Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is turn off the auxiliary sends, and we're going to turn off the bus processing. We're going to look at just the track processing here. What do we got going on here? This is LA2A simulation.
No one's ever asked, so no one knows.
Normally in tracking, I would do this on the way in to get a little bit of tube and a little bit of leveling out of the optical compressor. That's absolutely my favorite thing to do, tracking to tape. Also having the artist listen to that while they're recording and the monitoring, and that will go, we're gonna basically track that and commit to it right on the way in. What I'm doing here, looking at the waveforms, it looks like some saturation is happening on the way in. That's either from some clipping or from something. You can see the waveforms are asymmetrical. So there's already some harmonics happening with those as I got them. What I'm going to use this LA2A for is some additional compression, which is going to create a little bit of extra harmonics and also just some balance and some leveling. So with just that, we've got...
No one's ever asked, so no one knows.
Just a couple of dB knocked off there. We're going to bypass that.
No one's ever asked, so no one knows.
Put that back on.
No one's ever asked, so no one knows.
A little bit hard to tell exactly what's happening there because I'm doing a little bit of gain boost on that as well. Normally what I would do with a bunch of vocals is use this LA2A to level each track independently and kind of do what I would do on the way in anyway. After that, what we're doing is using this incredible plugin called Spectre. What Spectre is an enhancer, but essentially what's happening here using de-emphasis enabled, this is creating additional harmonics in specific bands. So I'm grabbing this vocal intelligibility band right here around 4K, using a very subtle algorithm and boosting some harmonic content in the audibility range. Also grabbing some of this air, that's a high pass band going on there. That's going to also grab some additional harmonics and make this sound much more like a tube mic, a lot more rich, and without adding any equalization. This looks a little bit like an equalization, but what we're doing is adding harmonic content as opposed to adding equalization. And that's kind of coming off of a synthesis technique where you're trying to sound like a specific instrument, and what you're going to do is build in the harmonics using different waveforms in synthesis. Like a sawtooth wave is going to give you that upper end harmonic content if the instrument that you're looking to design is has a lot of high frequencies. So what we're doing is grabbing the voice and adding more of that high frequency content without using equalization. I'm going to start with this bypassed.
No one's ever asked, so no one knows.
And see what that happens when we add it in.
No one's ever asked, so no one knows.
One more time with it out.
No one's ever asked, so no one knows. No one's ever asked, so no one knows.
So normally you'd have to stack a bunch of compressors and do a bunch of processing through some, whether it's transistors or tubes or tapes, to get a little bit of this edge happening, and that's why you would be going through those analog components to try to get some of that edge. I'm simply doing it with Spectre. So this track is now being sent to a vocal bus. That's right over here. On this vocal bus, I've got a stack of processing happening. Let's enable those and go through one by one. The first thing I'm adding in here is a high-pass equalizer.
No one's ever asked, so no one knows.
Okay, why am I not doing that at the very beginning of the chain? Because normally when I'm doing the recording myself, I'm using that LA2A on the Just Microphone preamp vocal. So I'm kind of used to the way it reacts with the full frequency spectrum. So instead, I'm kind of treating this vocal bus channel as how I would normally approach the processing myself after the recording. This is just a simple high pass at 100 hertz. This is a great sounding recording, and there's a lot of richness happening there from that microphone, so I'm wanting to keep a certain amount in. Depending on the orchestration, that would slowly creep up to get out of the baseband, but this is a pretty sparse orchestration, so it sounds nice just with this enabled. So I'm gonna leave it off.
No one's ever asked, so no one knows.
And put that back in.
No one's ever asked, so no one knows.
Almost inaudible at this point, but that clears it up for the orchestration. Next thing is my favorite compressor for vocals. This is the Renaissance compressor from Waves. This is a standard setting that I've used for probably 20 years. This is like a 2.5 compression ratio and 5 attack, 50 release. This is using their electro algorithm, not the optical. The optical is being handled by the LA2A. And this setting here, threshold -26 and the gain of 8, is something I've used for a very long time. I pretty much set the output of this LA2A to give me the right reduction in there. So let's leave that bypassed.
How do I feel? It's like I speak in codes.
Let's bring it in.
How do I feel? It's like I speak in codes.
So we're getting about a 10 dB reduction right there. What the Renaissance compressor does using this algorithm and these settings for me is just really brings the vocals just right up front, right to the forefront of the music. Kind of a pop thing, a country thing that even my rock vocals, I like to have them just smashed right up front. This sounds really natural to me. It seems to retain all of the dynamics and nuances of the vocals without sounding so compressed. Even though it is, the dynamic range of it is very limited. So it's very easy to get it highly audible on any kind of small speaker system. If I was to back off on that and let it be a little bit more dynamic, that might be fine for depending on what the output of the recording is going to be. But if this is going to be a pop mix or something that's going to be on the radio, you kind of want that really smashed.
How do I feel? It's like I speak in code.
Now we're not hitting the limiter that's built into that. We're going to do that at a later stage. Next thing down the pipe is Noveltech Vocal Enhancer. This is an amazing plugin that again is working on essentially the transient energy and doing some adaptive frequency in the spectral domain, if I'm not mistaken. It's not changing the content like Spectre's doing, but what it's doing is not operating in the silences, and instead of adding air or adding equalization, it's not going to give a bunch of hiss or bring up the background as much, and you can bring in the high end of that silky pop produced vocal sound very quickly, very easily. I'm just on the stock settings. Let's take a playback from there with it bypassed.
I, for one, am tired of being angry.
And then bring in the vocal enhancer.
I, for one, am tired of being angry.
With this here, I'm normally staying below this 9 o'clock range right here. Just this little subtle thing here is essentially how I'm bringing in high frequencies to the mix. You can see I didn't do any equalization. I'm just using Spectre, vocal enhancer, and just this high pass so far. After we've got that happening,
I am done with being stepping stone.
okay, we've got stepping stones there. Those don't sound super sibilant. They sound pretty nice, but you can see these little blues.
I am done with being stepping stones.
Those little S's right
I
there.
am done with being stepping stones.
But we are going to trim those off so that they don't get extremely sibilant once we go through the post-processing. I'm using DMG Audio Essence right here, one of the best de-essers that's still in the traditional de-essing sense.
I am done with being stepping stones. I am done with being stepping stones.
So we're trimming almost 6 dBs off those S's and some of those T's there. This is pretty much the stock settings, working down a little bit in the lower band. You can see I was jamming up with Spectre and with Noveltech up in that 5K vocal audibility range. This is kind of just making sure that that doesn't stay too much in your ears on those harsh transients.
I am done with being stepping stone.
Next thing that we're going to do is take this Mag EQ, and we're using the air band to push about 2 dB at 15K. That's just a really nice silky top end boost that always just sounds really nice.
Of being forgotten and alone.
Here's it with it bypassed.
Of being forgotten and alone.
Put that back on.
Of being forgotten and alone.
On this particular recording, it's pretty subtle, but it also just contributes to the audibility of the vocals. That's often what we're going for there. Then we're jumping that into a limiter here, and the way that this limiter is being used, although it is being used to control the peaks, L1 is also just really great at adding a little bit of extra grit by shaving off those tops and creating a little bit more of a square wave for some of that stuff. Continually helps with the audibility of the vocals. So this -10 setting is about where my mixes usually end up hanging for vocals.
I'm tired of the sickness that haunts me.
Some of those more plosives are grabbing 2 or 3 dB. Generally, in some of the quieter stuff, it's not going to be grabbing anything.
So tired. No one's ever asked, so no one knows.
With that bypassed.
No one's ever asked, so no one knows.
I don't think this is something you can actually hear, but it's going to not affect things down the pipe. And then for effects, you can notice my vocals generally sound pretty dry. I like them dry. I don't really like effects very much. I don't like to hear reverb on vocals. That's just me. I'm going to bring in the effects that I have. What we have going on here is a pretty big plate. This is pulled off of what I was doing on that Rise Up mix.
I'm tired of the sickness that haunts me.
This is just putting that into a nice space. There's a pretty big decay right here and a pretty big pre-delay. The big pre-delay really lets the transients of the vocals come through, so you can really hear what the singer is saying. And then the long decay just kind of keeps it very pillowed and easy to listen to. In the mix, you don't really hear that so much. I'm using the ballad vocal preset on Valhalla Plate, an amazing vocal reverb. Normally, I'd be using about a 1.8 to like a 2.2 second decay, just a smaller vocal thing on a regular song. In this one here, it's pretty big with the solo vocal, letting that kind of carry some pillowing there. And then we have a tape delay with also the amazing Soar from JST. This is giving another nice pillowing bed.
I am done with being stepping stones.
That's the reverb with the tape delay.
I am done with being stepping stones.
And then I have this throw channel here using Echo Boy on a quarter note delay, kind of matched into the tempo of the song. There's just one small throw that I threw in here for good measure right here.
Far down. Far down.
Just for a little fun. All right, so that's the vocal chain. Now that also gets thrown into our master bus, which is creating a little bit of extra dip in the 600K region and a little top end there. And we're also grabbing, using SPL iron. Those vocals are going to get kind of compressed a little bit more along with the music.
So far down.
Just touching about a decibel of gain reduction.
I'm tired of the sickness that haunts me.
And that's really just gluing the whole mix together. To take a quick look at the instruments, this guitar is in really rough shape. Difficult recording to work with. I'm pulling out a little bit of the 800 resonance. There's a lot of resonance going on here on this guitar. I'll step through that real quick. Here is the guitar. Guitar is going through a music bus, which is getting a little bit of saturation and a little bit of compression and limiting down the pipe. I'm going to let that play through it. There's our little 800 dip. Tone Spot acoustic plug-in here. This is doing some shaping. We're using this vintage character, which gives like a pre-shape. Tiny bit of saturation happening here. A little bit of low cut and removing some of the 600 region. And then we're using this finalizer stage, which is essentially is a equalization stage that kind of just pushes a little bit of top and bottom. With that bypassed and with it shaped. Then we're using a Renaissance axe to get some compression in there and again push it right up into your face. That's going to get a little more saturation as well out of that, more audibility. We're using the amazing Soothe to get rid of a lot of those guitar resonances. To hear what that's doing, that's going to be right here. That's what's being removed with Soothe Adaptive. L1 is also holding it back, trimming off a couple dB there, also contributing to a little bit of the saturation. And we're using the JST side widener here to create a little bit of stereo vibe to this track. Not pushing it out of phase, not going to cause problems with mono compatibility, but making it sound stereo. And I'm not using the second guitar track. The performance wasn't matched in too well to the other performance and it was really distracting, so I just left that out of the mix. And using that side widener to make a little bit of a bigger guitar. On piano, what do we have going on? There's these nice bass hits here. Really liked those. There's no other bass in the track. So I'm using sub filter to enhance that low region. Here's what that bypassed. With that on. A little more sub bass resonance when those things hit. I'm also using Spectre on this track to enhance a couple of different regions of the piano and give it a little bit of grit. Here's with Spectre off. Here's with Spectre on. Again, de-emphasis is enabled. That's not adding any equalization, just harmonic content in those specific regions. And we are using at the front end of this the bus glue keys. This is adding some serious saturation to this piano, which is mostly being used to increase audibility. With this off. back on. We're using the mellowest compression mode and the hottest saturation mode. That's going to do a little clipping on there and just push the volume of that forward. That complete bus is going through a little bit of extra saturation down here, and this is just creating an extra volume boost of about a decibel.
I'm tired of the sickness.
Lastly, our cello is going through the Opticom LA2A optical compressor, and this one has a lot of grit and a lot of saturation happening on it, not using any of the noise. This amplification stage really sounds great on just about everything, and this is leveling out this track just a little bit.
I'm tired of the sickness that...
Here's our gain reduction. 2 or 3 decibels happening there. Let's bypass that. You can really hear the upper mid-range get nice and big there. And then most importantly on this track here for vibe, this is going through a hall reverb right over here. And this is from Acon Digital, one of the greatest sounding algorithmic reverbs out there. Let's bypass that. Bring it back in. It's great, getting a great pillow on that track. Piano's going through that same hall algorithm, and the guitar is also grabbing a little bit of room reverb, which is a large wooden room from Verberate as well. Pump that whole thing through our master bus. First thing on the master bus is the Kazarog True Iron, and this is doing a transformer simulation, which is very subtle. Let's bypass that.
I'm tired of the sickness that haunts me. I'm weary.
Probably can't hear anything there. This is adding just a little bit of intelligibility, a little bit of thickness, and a little bit of glue in there. Extremely subtle. Highly oversampled algorithm. It sounds really good. Using Slick EQ M, and this is grabbing a safety low cut on there. Tiny bit of 80. Tiny bit of 120 removed. Decibel of 600 removed. Take a peek at that curve. You can see this is pretty wide, but that's only about a decibel and a half difference there below zero, and a nice little boost up at the top there with some sideband boost. This little light blue up there showing at the top end. Sides are being pushed out just a little bit more. That's going through our bus compressor for some glue. Only about a dB pulled off there, maybe a dB and a half. Also a really great sounding mastering compressor. Love to use it on stuff that's subtle. And we're just finalizing our protection output with L2 and giving ourselves an extra 5 dB pushed up there. Working with a lot of headroom here, so if I take L2 off, this would be able to be sent to somewhere else for mastering. And that's essentially what we've got here for Tired.
I'm tired of the sickness that haunts me. I'm weary of my own brain, it taunts me. I am afraid of being